Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. I'm Jeff Blankenburg, and as we do every Tuesday, I'm here to answer your questions about Alexa, Alexa development, voice design, all the things, ambient computing. And before we get to our guest today, who I'm super excited to chat with, I have a couple of brief announcements for you. The first one is if you are planning on attending reInvent, AWS reInvent, this is our big technology conference every year in Las Vegas. It is coming up very, very soon. It's November 28th through December 2nd, which is basically the entire week after Thanksgiving if you're here in the United States. But beyond that, we also have something that I've been working on personally over the last few weeks, and we're starting to get into a rhythm for it. And that specifically is that I've been doing a bunch of live coding in the mornings. Now, if you live on the West Coast, this is super early for you. I usually go on about 8:15 Eastern time and run until 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And I'm doing this a few days a week. You can find it on all of my personal channels. So this is YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you're following me in any of those places, you'll get notifications about going live for that. But I did want to mention that this morning we spent a little bit of time with this little device. I don't know if you can see that very well on camera, but this is the new Echo Dot with clock. And I was really excited to play with this today because as part of our APL set of technologies, there's something called APLT, which allows you to add text to the displays on an Echo Dot with clock while your skill is running. The first example I ever used of this was I was building my unofficial Star Wars databank skill. And if someone asked for the opening crawl from any of the movies, this is something that the skill does. It'll play any of the videos of the opening crawls from any of the 9 Star Wars movies. It'll also do, it'll read it to you if you don't have a device with a screen. But then beyond that, if you have a device that has APLT capabilities, which happens to be just the Echo Dot with clock devices, it would actually scroll the entire words of the movie opening there on the screen. So if you haven't seen those streams and you'd like to tune in, I'm building a kind of an interesting skill that is for skill developers, and I'd love to have you join me there. But with that, let's move on to the point of our episode today. Today I have one of our own, Brian Tarbox, here on the stream with me. Brian, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a real thrill.
So you and I had an opportunity to meet up at the Voice Summit, which was kind of cool in Washington, D.C. But I know you're actually in Boston, right? You run a Boston user group. You are also an AWS community hero. Let's have you, because most people probably haven't even seen your face before.
We're the Boston group, and this is actually my office. It's just an angle you can't see, so it's virtual, but it's real.
Got it. So can you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, what you've been up to these days?
Sure. Well, I've been programming since the dark ages. I mean, I started on a PDP-11. I bet there's almost no one here who even knows what that is, but those were the good old days. And
what was the language of choice on that?
Oh, Pascal, of course.
Oh, nice.
I actually started as a Pascal compiler guy. So that was kind of fun. And back in the early days, I actually did UIs, and I got a couple patents for UIs. And so now it's funny how it's all come full circle. I've been I started writing skills. I have a Premier League skill that looks at British football. We don't say that S word in my house. And I started it. I mean, we talk a lot about how do you get a skill popular. And at the Voice Summit, they talked a lot about figuring out who your users were. Well, originally, I was a user. I just wanted to know. Mm-hmm. And so I coded it for my own convenience. And then some people liked it, and it's sort of taken off. And I know there's also been discussion about Node versus Python. And I originally wrote it in Node just because I didn't know Node. And then, sorry to offend probably 3/4 of the user base, but Node makes my brain hurt. And so I went to Python, and I like it a lot better. Oh yeah, AVAX 11.7 and 11.750, absolutely. RSX 11, RSX 11M plus, yes.
We've got some people here with some gray hair, in addition to the two of us, I see.
Okay, well then I'll tell you a quick story. Some of you may remember paper tape. Digital had this little 1-inch paper tape that for punching and obviously incredibly slow. And we set one of our PDP-11s to have the paper tape as the swap device.
Oh, wow.
And it generated confetti. And I also went through and what's the really big snowmobiles? The one
Glacier?
that's no the Mack truck. The Mack truck.
Oh. I think that might be called snowmobile.
Snowmobile. I figured out how long a paper tape you would need to store a snowmobile, and it was 187 light years.
Oh my gosh, that's remarkable.
Yeah. So
I'm sure there were a couple people that were just realized that a light year is a measure of distance, and that's
yes, indeed.
All right. Well, Brian.
So sorry, I was going to say I've started a new job at Epic, writing Alexa skills, and I think they hired me because I liked my prem skill.
Awesome. So, obviously, you've been building skills for a while, really since the beginning. I know you and I talked about how there wasn't a CLI, there wasn't SMAPI, there wasn't a lot of these SDKs that we have, all these fancy tools we have now. It was pretty bare bones in the early days.
Right. It was just the Lambda console and the developer console. So I've stayed that way until fairly recently. I mean, only recently have I sort of seen the light and switched to doing local development with IntelliJ and Code Whisperer. And let me say, oh my God, Code Whisperer, go get it. It's incredible. I was telling Jeff just before the thing started, I was writing some stuff this morning, and I had set a few variables that I was going to use in something. And I said, logger.info, and it said, do you want me to write an F string to print the variables you just set? I'm like, yes, please, thank you. It's like having an intelligent partner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like pair programming, but without the second body.
Right. And, so I do everything locally. I use code commit for my storage, push early, push often, SMAPI deploy. Here's the thing. The cycle now is quick enough that I don't lose interest. It's like code, deploy, and I move my mouse up. And in the past, it might have been, let me go check Slack. Let me go check something else. It's like, oh, it's deployed already. All right, I'll run the next test.
I don't know why that just happened. My apologies. So I have found the same to be true. There was a time where I was developing before we had. So I use. Am I doing that? I don't think I'm doing that. There was a time before I got into VS Code heavily, where I was doing a lot of my development, but I still had to do the deploy, right? And I had to deploy it basically to production, to push it to the full Lambda in order to do any of my testing. And especially when you're live streaming, there's just so much waiting to be able to run and test your stuff. And it could be 15, 20, 30 seconds sometimes, especially as the project got big. And so when VS Code came out, well, it had been out, but like when we had a lot of the Alexa stuff built into it, it gave me the opportunity to enable local debugging. And so now, and I don't know if you're doing this or not, Brian, we'll dig into like how you develop and the process you go through and all that. But for me, local debugging has changed everything, because now I have the full console. I can talk to any device and it's still running the code that's local on my machine. I can set breakpoints. I can see the request and the responses they're brought in and sent out. It is so fast that I don't ever feel like I'm waiting anymore, because there's no deploy for me at all. And that has made a huge difference in my process.
Now it's really interesting, because this gets into some real stylistic things, in that I try not to ever have to debug, in that I was in the dark ages. I was a Prolog programmer. I actually wrote some AI stuff with bottlenose dolphins, of all things. And the tools were terrible back then, but Prolog's a functional language. And so I really drank the Kool-Aid of tiny little functions that didn't need debugging, and figuring out what's going on in production. I mean, my philosophy is if I have a problem in production, I better have the logging to let me know exactly what's going on. And so I always write with enough logging that I don't need to debug. Now, that may just be because I started developing when you couldn't debug. But
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. And to be honest, like even as a node developer myself, I still find that I build tiny little functions that do one thing specifically, but I'm so prone to a simple typo, or like, especially when I'm calling APIs, like if I don't craft that URL properly, then something breaks and I need to look at that and see what's going on. So I still find that there's maybe it's just an artifact of me using Node, but I feel like there's still a lot of times where I need to run it and test it and see what's going to happen to make sure that it's headed in the right direction before I start building the next little function that is the second component of that,
Sure.
Awesome. Well, hey, before we get deeper into this, and I want to start asking you about how you build and all that stuff, I want to remind everybody that's here, this is a standard office hours. So if you guys have questions about anything related to Alexa and ambient computing and whatever else we can support you with, please feel free to drop that in the chat, whether you're here on Twitch or LinkedIn or Twitter, or whatever service you might be here on. It looks like we've got a couple people on Facebook, a couple on YouTube. Most of the folks are here on Twitch, which is cool, because that means you guys also get to see all that conversation. And we'll get to your questions as we're going through this. But I definitely want to welcome all of our regulars that are here. There's lots of familiar names, so I appreciate all of you. David Curley wants to know if that local debugging setup is written up anywhere. So let me grab that really quick, Brian. And actually, while I'm digging into that, let me ask you a question that you can tell us the answers for.
Okay.
So I know you talked about your Premier League skill, the English football skill that you have. When you think about building skills, what are some of the extra features that you put into your skills that kind of make them a little more interactive, or I'm blanking on the word I want. Engaging, that's the word I was looking for.
Well,
what are some of the things you do?
Well, it's funny because I actually had the skill team. One of the teams, the skill feedback certification improvement, the feedback team. I forget which one they are, but they looked at my skill and they said, "Hey, why don't you do a couple things?" And so I did. So adding APL, not for the faint of heart, but it's pretty cool. And then APLA, and so I have background crowd noise whenever I have a visual display. And some users have said, "Hey, I can't hear what you're actually saying over the crowd noise." And I just say, "Yeah, it's like being at the stadium, man."
It's realistic.
Yeah. And it's funny, I went to your talk on 10 things or 10, 11 things every skill developer should do. And a lot of them really resonated. So everything is varied. Every statement that I say could be said a bunch of different ways. I use the SSML emotions to say, Liverpool won, Arsenal lost, depending on your point of view. I've added personalization, which is really quite nice. And I do have a question about that in a sec, but I went multimodal. I went multilingual, although that didn't really catch on. I did in-skill purchasing, but then I decided I didn't really want to make people pay for extra features. I've added send to phone, which is really quite nice, because one of the things I do a lot is make charts, because just listing stats gets a little mind-numbing.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot of charts, and there's some charts that I think nobody else is doing, not even the big leagues, and then you can send them to your phone. So that's so I'm trying to use all the new features, but that actually gets me to a question. So I was going to start doing voice forward account linking, but to use that, you cannot have skill personalization turned on.
Yeah, I have seen that comment in the docs as well.
And I don't, and it's funny because one of the folks in our Slack channel, and if you're not on the Slack channel, get on the Slack channel. It's amazing. But someone said, well, maybe it's because someone other than the account owner could turn on linking. But if you don't have personalization, anyone can turn it on. So
it feels like a weird requirement. I think because I feel like maybe you and I have talked about this before, but When I think about account linking, it's generally meant to allow me to access the account details of someone that already has an account somewhere else on the web, whether that's like you're logging with Amazon stuff, or if I have my own data store and I have my own users, I probably already know their name and their email address and some other aspects of that person. And so it feels weird to me to turn skill personalization off, because in many ways that's another way for me to identify my user. And it feels like they could go nicely hand in hand, but I do understand your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not sure, because we're without saying too much about what I'm working on. We are, and I've talked about it on office hours before, things like linking to outside stores, the possibility of raffles and stuff. It's interesting. So account linking is something I definitely want to play with, but I still want to be able to say, welcome to Premier League, Jeff.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of power in that. And I think, when you look at some of the personalization APIs that are available where you can request that kind of information, it does make a big difference. And it's unfortunate. And I know I've talked about this before at length. It's unfortunate that the world contains bad actors, because there's so many cool things we could do in so many better ways if it weren't for that case. And, this personal data is a good example. Like your Alexa account already has an email address. It already has a location, right? Maybe your whole physical address, or at least a zip code, has your first and last name. And we have to go through a permissions exercise to request that information from you in each individual skill, because if we just gave it to everyone, it would be used in some malicious way that a user wouldn't want. And it's really sad to me, because I feel like the world of software and the capabilities that we have could be so much better if we didn't have the bad actor element. But I don't think that's avoidable, unfortunately.
Right. Well, I remember back in the early days, we couldn't even get the zip code you were in.
Yep.
Because that was considered too revealing.
Yep.
So well, I tell my family, assume that every phone call, text message, and email is a scam, and don't reply to anything without checking with me.
No, I think that's valid. In fact, my mother-in-law, who I talk to regularly and am quite a big fan of, I got a message from her on Facebook Messenger over the weekend. And she said, "Hey, how are you and the family doing?" And I was like, "Oh, we're doing good." Now, it's a weird question to ask me just on Facebook, just to reach out that way. Like, she would normally call or talk to my wife maybe. But I was like, "Yeah, things are good." And then she asked me a bunch of questions that weren't anything that I was concerned about answering, but clearly it was not. And she ended it with, "So what are you doing? What are you all doing this weekend?" And I said, well, actually on Saturdays, we really enjoy identifying scammers on Facebook. And that was my reply to them. And immediately they blocked me. It was very surprising.
Right. Well, anytime I see on Facebook someone saying, "Hey, let's play a game. What was the street you were on when you grew up in high school?" And it's like, it was none of your damn business, Lane.
Exactly. That is exactly right. Yeah, it's just amazing to me. I mean, we could do another hour on just that subject alone. But what I would like to do is talk about your development process. So we talked a little bit about some of the cool things that you add to skills, but I'd like to know more about, from start to finish, what is your dev environment look like? What are the tools that you use? What are the tools that you don't use? I'd love to hear all about that.
Okay, sure. Well, I'll say I'm never going back to an office, hopefully, ever. I've got multiple high-end Macs. I've got 4 monitors in front of me. I've got my dog sitting on my feet, below me. I've become a real coffee snob. AeroPress hand ground coffee is the only way to go. And it's I generally have a play skill where I sort of play with things. So if I break it, if I push into production and it crashes or something, I just experiment with that. And then once I have that going, I pull it into my main skill. I try to keep my Python modules small and well named. I mean, my background is in linguistics, so my code is generally incredibly boring, because it's like, player equals get player equals team get player. Not going to win any prizes, but you're also not going to be confused. And all the module is going to, the function, the method is going to fit on screen, especially using Code Whisperer. Because in Code Whisperer, you write a function, you write a comment that says, function to get the nth element out of 2 common arrays, whatever. And it writes a function for you. And
Yeah.
so you learn to write very concise, articulate comments that turn into really nice modules.
But I will tell you, I think that all the prizes should be given to someone that writes player equals team.getPlayer, because that's what it should be. Anytime someone is doing, like, I feel like there's this competition with developers to be clever, and I do not subscribe to the clever code ideas. Like, I want to be able to sit down, look at your code, and understand what's going on. And while we're not going to unify everyone on like the right way to write code, I feel like small modules that are clearly named and labeled is the way to go. It should always be.
Right. It's crazy. I remember one of my companies coming across a method, void find path. It's like, okay, so the method finds a path, and then what does it do with it? And, we joke that it put it into the side effect manager, so it's, yeah. Save me from clever. It's horrible. I will say, as just a little stylistic thing that I do, because a lot of times, I just do things in production. And if my boss is listening, we won't do that moving forward. But in my own stuff, if I want to test out a method, I'll put it in the launch handler and just have it do some calculations and write some logs, and everything's protected with, try blocks. And so then I just start the skill, and I get my log output. I see whether it worked or not. I debug it, and then I get, some confidence, and I can put it in there. The other thing I'll say is, because I do a lot of videos and audio files and big images, I'm a huge fan of CloudFront. So both for speed, because I'm getting like 95% hit rates, and also just for security, so I can lock down my S3 bucket with Origin Access Identity, OAI.
Okay.
And then nobody can get at it except for CloudFront. So I've really paid a lot of attention to the performance.
Because CloudFront makes a big difference for anybody that's not familiar with CloudFront. I mean, it's your typical CDN, right? It allows me to move my content out to the web in a cached manner that allows me to limit costs and bandwidth and a number of other factors. I don't know if I'm explaining that as well as you would, Brian, but that's generally the way I think about CloudFront.
Right. Well, CloudFront puts points of presence around the world. And so for my Premier League skill, over half my traffic's in UK. So having a CloudFront over there, saves me 200 millisecond. The speed of light between Boston and England, or LA and England, is non-trivial. A couple hundred milliseconds makes the difference. And there's some other point I wanted to make. Well, it'll come back to it.
Oh, that's right. So let me ask some more pointed questions about your dev setup. So are you, I know you said that you're using Code Whisperer, but from what I understand in the conversations you and I have had previously, you've also done a lot of your work in the console. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, for the first 6 years that I was coding, that was the only choice. And so, I know, I think a lot of people probably cringe to think, you're doing live coding in the console? It's like, yeah, well, remember, I started with a PDP-11, so it doesn't, it doesn't seem so bad. I mean, the console's not bad. I mean, could it be better? Sure, but that's probably not the place to put a lot of to put a lot of effort, but it's quick, run.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there are definitely improvements that need to be made about the console. But I honestly believe that there is a place for both. And I think that learners often thrive in a console world. And then once they're comfortable with the ideas and the concepts and the technology behind it, it's really easy to make that transition to some kind of CLI SMAPy world where now I know what I'm doing. Now I just need to move the bits to the right places.
Right. And the thing is, by being up in the console, the other tools that I use quite a bit, I live and breathe in Cloud Whisperer and logs, and then the CloudWatch logs.
Yes.
And I've recently started doing the CloudWatch insight graphs, and so one of the things that has really surprised me over the years is my Prem skill has about 17 different verbs. I think of them as verbs. It's tend to be, you ask a thing, it gives a response, you ask a thing. And, I've been surprised that some of the verbs just aren't popular. And so, the insights graphs let me see, well, no one seems to be caring which referees give the most yellow and red cards. Now, as an ex-player, I'm really interested in that. But if most people aren't, then it gives me a clue that I don't necessarily need to, well, it gives me one of two conflicting clues. Either I need to really beef it up to make it better and engaging, or let it go.
Yeah. And that's something I've seen as well. In fact, that was one of the things I talked about in that 10 things every voice app should do talk, was that you should make a lot of decisions based on your data, right? And so if you go in and you're like, oh, I'm going to add a whole bunch of new referee functionality, and then you look at your data and you're like, actually, nobody really uses this. Now, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy there, which is no one's using it, so I'm not going to add more features to it, which means no one's going to continue to use it. And it could just be that it needed the tweak that you want to make, and that makes all the difference. And I see that with things that we do on our side too, right? A lot of people say, oh, you know what, like Node is like 75-80% of all of the people that build Alexa skills. I don't actually know the numbers, but I know it's pretty significant. And people argue with me and say, well, yeah, but that's all your samples are in. So of course there's going to be more people that do that. And I'm using the large percentage of Node developers as justification for why all of our documentation is in. So it's this flywheel of confusion. Which came first? Is it that lots of people want to use Node, or is it that all of our docs are in Node and that's why people are using? Right. I'm sure some people will have some very hot takes on that in the chat.
Right. Well, it's somewhat similar to APL. One of the stats, I know you can't tell us any of the stats, so
if I usually don't know. It's not that I can't tell.
Well, yes, but like if I were to say what percentage of the echoes out there are shows.
Oh yeah.
I know you can't say that. But anecdotally, it seems like most people who have multimodal skills see about 25% of their users are on a show device. I see about 60% of my users are on show devices. The show is a great display. And for statistics, and visualization, and, for sports, yeah, the verbal is great for when's the next game or how did my team do. But, if I want to tell you what are the 5 players who have the best goals to shots ratio, it gets a little, it's hard to do it verbally in an interesting way.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I've also, everything that I do is blah, 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 blah. Would you like to hear more? Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Would you like to hear more?
Do you, so that's a good one. I like that lesson that like you give something that's concise with the option to dig in deeper if you want to hear more. Do you have other lessons like that you kind of keep as a rule of thumb? Like, this is a way I do a thing. This is a way that I approach this common problem. Do you have any more nuggets like that?
Very verbose logging, is one of them. Really deep sample utterances. A couple of weeks ago, I went through the utterance profiler, or the annotation set. And it's funny, it gives me a lot of fails for case not matching, which is weird. But it gave me some strange outliers. Like it said, one of the sample utterances I should handle is, "Who's the Premier of England?" And it's like, well, aside from the fact that changes too much right now,
Right.
it's not Premier, football. But it did make me think, okay, there are a bunch of things that, most of my verbs have about 20 different variants, and that's worth it. So I'd say also spend a lot of time in the analytics, especially after we have an analytics person on the show to tell us what they mean.
Yes. And my good friend Tamsin behind the scenes is working on landing somebody for that for sure.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's mostly just play with it, and have your spouse or your kid play with it and see what they come up with. That's handy because I'm so used to it. I've been running this one skill for 7 years. I know what to say to it.
Right. Yeah, that is one of the curses of being the developer of a skill, is that you know exactly what to say and how to say it to get the thing you want to happen. And you almost need a different brain to use your skill to say, hey, this doesn't work or whatever. And that's this voice skill that I'm working on, it's meant to be kind of a toolkit for developers to hear what things sound like without having to dig into docs and like generate like you said, you have a play skill that you dump stuff into to try it. I'm imagining a skill like that will make things a lot easier for people. But I also know that right now I know exactly how to use it. And the moment that I let others use it, I'm going to have to stop and like really reset to be able to understand, why are people saying it that way? And why is this going sideways? And like, the model that I think is really sound is going to break really quickly.
Right. Well, so I think you were mentioning, or maybe someone at Voice Summit was mentioning, and maybe we can do this, or maybe I can do this privately, but the notion of a little, 5-person meetup where, we each take 10 minutes and we turn our skill on, and the other 4 people talk at the skill and we see what breaks. I think that would be an amazing hour. And I'd say if anyone in the Slack group wants to set that up or is interested in that, message me or Jeff, because I think we're a community of folks who presumably all want to help each other. I mean, the Slack group is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And in fact, there is a channel. I'm going to look right now to see what it's called. There's a channel in our Slack called Beta Testers Wanted. And maybe we start the conversation there about meetups, or I'd even be willing to think about hosting a regular stream where I'm just kind of there. And I can invite everybody in. We can do like you and I are doing right now, but we kind of broadcast it so everybody can watch and see what's being said and how, like, oh my gosh, they said that thing and it broke and this is why. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned by that. That's a cool idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd have to have people, would want to have more than just 2 of us talking.
Oh yeah. I agree. We could, this tool that we're using, which is called StreamYard, we can have up to 10 people at a time. So,
that would be, I think that would be amazing. And not only just for helping the individual developers, add some sample utterances, but just a shift in thinking.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. I'm going to take a quick pause here, and I want to scroll back because I think there were a couple of questions that I wanted to address. I know that Alexei on YouTube has had his issue. He's having some issues with his invocation name, and he's trying to publish his skill within the next 7 days for his customer, but he's having some issues. So this is one of the other things that you guys might start to notice, is that a lot of your pressing issues are starting to be solved by our developer advocacy group. They are sitting here behind the scenes. They've already addressed Alexei's problem. They've got his contact us form request, like it has a ticket number, and they're working with him directly on that. So if I don't answer your question, it might just be because the DAG team is already handling it and working on that stuff. Also, we were talking earlier about local debugging, and I think that David Curley was the one that asked if there's any documentation on that. So I shared in the chat a link to a way to test your skills in Visual Studio Code that's found in our tech docs, and it walks you through everything that you need to know to do that. And Habuma even said that he has a video on his YouTube that calls out exactly how to set that up and what he went through to do it. So it's great to have the community working on this stuff too. Thank you, Habuma, for that. Gavin Watson said he loves playing with scammers in the same way that I do. I think that's always a good time. I've run some people on some very long email threads for a while, but eventually you get bored and you just want to stop messing with them. W. Giorgio said he's still looking for an answer on why APL karaoke is not working. Let me flag that for another follow-up. I did send a message a few weeks ago or whenever that was that we talked about it. But I'll dig in on that again and we'll see what we can come up with. W. Giorgio also said that his coworkers hate the console, even running Git commands, and especially not something like Vim. And then, the religious code editor conversation started. Some people love VI and Vim. Other people found out that there's David Curley said there's a Vim plugin for VS Code. Crazy. Gavin Watson said, what is the event coming up in November/December? So the event that I mentioned at the very beginning of the broadcast, it's called AWS reInvent. David, if you haven't heard about that, or it was Gavin, I apologize. Gavin, I know you're based in the UK. It is in the Las Vegas here in the United States. It's a week long. There are sessions Monday to Friday from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. It's a ton of content across. If you've ever been to Vegas, like on the Las Vegas Strip, there's like, 15, 20 hotels. Each one of them is somehow a mile apart, but it feels like it's next door. And I think 9 of those hotels, I don't have the official number, but a significant number of those hotels are all reInvent sites. And so you might go to MGM for some of your sessions. You might go to the Venetian for some of your other sessions. I think the Aria is another one that has some of the content. And so they have buses. I mean, it pre-COVID, this was attracting nearly 100,000 people a year. So it's a very, very big event, which is why they have to have so many places. But it takes place the week, I think it's November 28th through December 2nd. For those of us in the United States, that is the week immediately following U.S. Thanksgiving. And so I will be there that entire week. If any of you are going to be there, please reach out, because I am going to have a way more free time than I normally do. I'm giving a talk, and it's not until Thursday afternoon, but I'll be there Sunday night. So if people want to get together and meet up, I might just find a place publicly to sit and work on my skill or whatever. But it's a requirement as a speaker that you're there the entire week, because they will move things around and schedules will shift and you might get added. They might add a session of yours. It goes all sorts of directions. And so you have to be there the whole week just in case. Okay. Fangam said, some of my elderly clients just say Alexa without a command and expects a response. And the Alexa team had a feature like Siri has, where just saying the wake word without a command after 1 or 2 seconds returns, or I'm here, or I'm ready. Fangam, that's an interesting idea. So you're saying they just say the wake word and they don't get anything else. They're waiting for the device to respond. I wonder if that's a setting, because I know that if you talk to the device, obviously the blue light will turn on, but it would be interesting to get it to reply to you, because it didn't hear anything else. It just got the wake word. I've marked that down. This is one of those things. This is my opportunity to talk about places you guys can go to do this on your own sometimes. Is we have a website called User Voice. User Voice is a separate website run by a third party, but we have a site on there, and you can go to alexa.design/uservoice, or if you're crafty, you can go to alexa.uservoice.com. And in either case, you end up at the same destination, which allows you to submit your feature requests. So here's the thing, I guess, that I want to lay out for all of you. If you have something that Alexa doesn't do today, and you want the devices and the servers and everything else to be able to do whatever your idea is, that's User Voice. If something is supposed to work and it isn't working, that is the contact us form. Hey, I'm expecting this to go this way. I'm having problems. I'm running into this issue, certification, whatever it is. All of those things are contact us. So I want to make sure I just make that distinction. If you're logging bugs in User Voice, that's reviewed, but it's not going to be reviewed as frequently as Contact Us, which has a ticket and a system, and people are running on those very, very quickly. But you wouldn't want to submit a feature request that way, because they're just going to throw it in a queue, and then it's going to end up in the same destination. But User Voice is a better way to do it, because people can vote on things, they can add to your idea and comment on it, and there's all sorts of good stuff there. So make sure you keep that distinction in your head. I'm curious. Actually, Brian, have you ever submitted anything to User Voice?
Oh my God, yeah. Probably a dozen or so
Nice.
items. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's also good to go there and see, wow, we've asked for like 200 things. So they're not all going to happen,
Yeah.
tomorrow. But
Yep.
it's interesting to see what people want. And I'll just say, incidentally, for reInvent, I'm also going to be there in the Slack general channel. I posted a link. I've written a reInvent for newbies guide. So if you're going to reInvent and you haven't been there before, check it out, because it is a 5-day, 24-hour marathon, and there are some tips so that you don't burn out.
That's great, Brian. I think I've read this, but I don't know that I knew you at the time.
Oh,
That's fantastic.
yeah, it's hydrate, have good shoes, and bring a whole bunch of $1, €1 bills to tip your waiters, because you're going to drink like crazy, and people are going to give you incredible amounts of free drinks, and it's nice to treat them like human beings.
Yes. I very much. You can also just go to the casino and get some chips. In all the casinos, they will take chips as currency. So you can. I wouldn't pay my bill with it, but you could just buy casino chips and then use those as $1 tips all night too.
Wow.
Very, very cool. Yeah, that's usually what I will do. And it's not because I may have been at the tables already. That never happens. That is actually true. I don't know if I've told this story on Office Hours, but I was at the Momentum Developer Conference last week in Cincinnati, and it was held at the Hard Rock Casino there in Cincy. And I was on my way out, and I had a $20 bill in my pocket, and I was like, I drove all the way down here. I never go to casinos when I'm home. It's usually just a Vegas only kind of thing. But I walked over. My wife loves the Wheel of Fortune slot machines, and there was a $1 one like right by the door that I was leaving, and I was like, So I put the $20 in. Each spin was $6, I think, and so I spun it, and I lost, and I spun it, and I won $3, which feels like you won, except that you paid $6 for the spin, so you still really lost $3. And then the third one, I spun it, and the machine started like rumbling and going crazy, and a gold Wheel of Fortune symbol showed up on the little 3 things that were there. And so that there was a digital display above it, and that started spinning like a Wheel of Fortune. And there was all these numbers on it, but it landed on 2x. And I was like, great, I can win a prize. And all I won was like double my next spin or something. And it turns out that was not the case. Then there was a big physical wheel up above that. And that thing started spinning. And the lowest number on it was 40, but I hit 100. And it applied the 2x to the 100. And so my $20 turned into $200. And I couldn't hit the payout, like cash out of the slot machine button fast enough. Because, I just put 10x on my money. That never happens in a casino. So it was a delightful story for that day.
Right. And very, very rare. I remember being down at a casino in the Caribbean. This young woman gave her boyfriend, spouse, whatever, half her money, said, don't give it back to me. She blows it. Give me my money, Donnie. She blows it. And then she says to the dealer, y'all take jewelry?
Man, yeah, you can get in a lot of trouble real fast. I took my team out to play craps, the dice game, when we were at reInvent one year, and we just caught a good roller. Somebody was doing really well, and we were playing a very basic strategy for the game, but all of us walked out $500 richer on that one, and that felt. I mean, that was just the luck of the table at the time, but it worked out very, very well because none of them had ever even played before. So I do enjoy casino games, but no one has enough money to do it all the time. All right. I don't think that I have any other questions. We still have about 15 minutes. Questions from the chat. I have something else I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
But I want to make sure I'm paying attention to the chat. Okay. So we have 15 minutes left. I've specifically time boxed this because I know you and I could probably talk at length about this question for the next 7 hours. But what are some of your biggest frustrations? Biggest frustrations as an Alexa developer?
Frustrations?
I know. I'm sure you have none, but like dig deep and see if you can find at least one thing.
Okay. So I think I've thought a lot about this and about what to say here. And I think a couple of very small tweaks would make a huge difference. And the TLDR is, I think if the if the SDK team would subclass exception to more exception types, that would be great. So as an example, I was trying to do send to phone on my main skill, and it said, invalid request. Okay, fine. And I was, wasn't having a lot of luck because I couldn't see what was wrong. Okay, fine. I then was putting my main skill into certification for something totally else, and I moved to one of my side skills, and I was doing send to phone, and I talked with some folks on the Slack who showed me what I was doing wrong with my JSON, and it still gave me invalid request. And about 3 weeks went by, and then I discovered, and then my main skill came out of certification, and so I took the same code I had in my play skill into my main skill, and it worked. And it turned out my main skill had been approved for send to phone, and the play skill had not. And so invalid request really meant unauthorized request.
Yeah.
But that burned 3 weeks. And so that's what I'm saying. If the exception was simply subclassed to this is invalid because it's unauthorized, that by itself would have saved me 3 weeks. And I think there are so many of these where and I've said this a couple times, somewhere in the code, there's a line that says, wow, I was expecting such and such, and you didn't, so I'm going to reject it. Or I wasn't expecting this, and you provided, I'm going to reject it. Just tell me that. And right. I think the temperature of the community would come down 20 degrees.
Wow, so, that's a good one. I like that. I agree. I run into those issues all the time. I don't know that I've lost 3 weeks on them, but I've certainly lost time as a result of an error message that I got. I was just working this morning, and I'm not sure what I did or how I did it, but I work on 2 separate machines. So I have a MacBook that I work on 99% of the time, and then when I'm live streaming, I'm on this really beefy like gaming PC, and I do development on both, and I'm using GitHub, so I bump my code back and forth between the 2 machines pretty easily. But this morning I was trying to run code that I had built on my Mac, and I'd committed it last week, and then this morning I needed it to run, and none of it would work. It wasn't even recognizing the simple JavaScript function replace all, which just replaces all instances of a string with another string. And I could not figure out what was going on, and so I tried checking something with NPM, and it was telling me that NPM couldn't run in this node environment. And what had happened was I was consistently upgrading my NPM on this PC that I don't use that often. But I had not upgraded Node, and Node had finally, the Node version that I had installed on this machine had phased out old enough that the NPM version I was running wasn't allowed to run in that old version of Node anymore. It was like 10.6 or something instead of 16 or whatever we're on now. And so I had to spend a little bit of time like going back and fixing all this stuff. But the reason I found all of that was because something silly in my skill was just not operating properly, and I was getting all of these errors, and it really had nothing to do with my skill at all. It was an old Node environment, but none of the errors were telling me that. It was just, hey, this is broken, which is challenging for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think it's a not having seen the lowest level of the code base, but this is sort of thing that one would assume would be relatively straightforward to fix, because somewhere there's a throw exception, return -1, something, and just bubble that up. And I do understand there's a privacy concern. You don't want to bubble as you're bubbling up. You don't want to bring up any PII that some developer might see. But so I think that would save enormous amounts of time.
Yeah, agreed. But that's a good one. So what else you got? I'm sure that wasn't the only frustration that you run into.
Well, the Python documentation, that's, but it's funny. You're making a Python sample skill. I'm trying to make a Python sample skill that does personalization and APL and so on. And, I've done a couple of APL Ninja things. So I think that's possible. I actually have a question. So, and this may just be dumb on me, but with A/B testing and beta testing. What I'd really like to do, so like I'm having this issue, and I won't go too much into it, where I'm getting some fallbacks that I don't understand, and we had talked about that I might try the catch-all expression.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go through like a 2-week certification process to get it in, find that maybe it's sealing everything, and then a 2-week certification process to get it out. What I'd love to do is an A/B test where I put this out and let 1% of my live users go to it, just so I can get a sample. Is that possible, or I think I may be just misreading it all.
I think now I haven't built A/B testing in, but this is something I'll be introducing into this skill that I'm working on as well. My understanding with A/B testing is that you should be able to do that, right? You're representing 2 different models, and those 2 different models can be dialed up and down different percentages. So it's like what you're describing is possible. What I haven't done it in practice though to verify that. And I'm sure there might be somebody in the chat that has done that, so maybe we'll get some feedback from them too.
Because I'm just wondering how it would work with certification. So like right now I have a Lambda and my voice model, and it's certified. It's actually in review right now for something else, but and if I put a switch in my Lambda to say 10% of the time go over here or versus go over there, and then I A/B'd it, does that require a cert pass?
Yeah. So if let me look at something really quick.
Because that would be awesome.
Yeah, you are this is what I thought I was saying. So you're simultaneously deploying 2 versions of the same skill, so you can experiment with the variables and decide which version receives a better response. So yes, you are deploying 2 versions of the skill. So there are restrictions. Oh, I'm sorry. I was misspeaking. Your A/B testing is really I'm bad with words today. You can set it up to point to one Lambda or the other Lambda. And so you can send 10% of your users to one Lambda function and 90% to the other Lambda. But as I was looking at this, for some reason I had it in my head that you could do that with your interaction model also, and that's not true. So what we're really talking about is testing 2 different back-end services, but not testing your front end, which would be different models. You still have one model. It will manage and split and spray across those 2 Lambda functions though at the percentage you specify.
Okay. And I'm looking for the other thing. I want to like
you want to test different models. And A/B testing does not do that today. In fact, just to clarify for everybody, you can't do things like different invocation names, different permissions, different account linking, in-skill purchasing, or interaction model changes, or even skill manifest changes. So all of that stuff is things you cannot run A/B tests on today. I don't know if the fact that they call all of that stuff out, I don't know if that means that maybe they're working on that and that's future work. But for today, it is really just point at 2 different Lambda functions.
Okay. Yeah. So that wouldn't help me. And just for the audience, I'm getting fallbacks that I didn't expect. I'm not sure what the people are saying. Okay. It would be cool if fallback could tell us what the user said, even in some closely guarded way. It's like I don't need to hear the actual audio, but from a privacy point of view, if I could see the transcript of what a user said on an utterance that went to fallback, it's hard to see how that would violate anyone's privacy.
Well, the concern, I think the bigger concern broadly that our lawyers and PR teams and everybody have is that people are sometimes talking and don't realize their device is on. And that would trigger your fallback intent, right? If they're talking to a friend or answering the phone or whatever else they could be doing while near their device. And if we give you the text or the audio transcript of what they were saying, you're potentially hearing a private conversation that was not intended for you to be heard. So that is, I'm going to include this as feedback. Like this is something that I know that they've heard loud and clear over and over and over. Because if my skill is choosing to fall back, it would be incredibly beneficial for me to understand, at least on an aggregate, why is it falling back? Are there specific things or words that people are saying? Or is it that, there's something about my skill that reminds people that they want to go do something else?
Right. Well, it's funny. Thomas Lawrence in one of the chats says, can you constant log the heard as and fallback? I'm unfamiliar with that, but I'll take a look at it.
I am too. I'm gonna dig into this while we're here.
Yeah, and I'll say to Manliro, who said, "Could I look at the interaction model and intent history?" The problem that I'm running into, and this may just be me, is the intent history says that people are saying the word yes, which is somehow going to fall back, even though so there's something weird. The other thing I wonder, Jeff, is maybe not even tell me, but it's like, if I could chat with a because I suspected y'all at Amazon have access to that.
I would think that somebody has access to that data. You're right.
Right. If someone could, if someone could just say to me, so like I actually have in my my skill is going through a certification pass where I added every other sports team in the world. And so I now say, the Boston Red Sox are not a Premier League team. Hey, the Montreal Canadiens are not a Premier League team. If someone could just say, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you're talking about another sport, in another league, or, they're talking the Premiership of England. Someone just give me a clue. Give me a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. Well, and Malero also mentioned, like, you can look at your intent history and see what people are getting to your fallback intent, but it does, and you have the users to justify this, but there are some limitations on the interaction model intent history where you have to have enough users to unlock it. I don't know how many it is, but let's say it's 10 a day or something like that. But there's some minimum amount, because again, if we give you individual analytics like that on a skill that only has 2 users, you could probably figure out which user it is. But when you have a larger aggregate like that, I do feel like there is something, I have to go back and look. I don't spend a ton of time in the analytics, primarily because I'm not running any large scale production skills. But I do feel like, have you looked at the intent history in the analytics, Brian? And Is it giving you anything useful?
No, it's I keep seeing the user said yes, it went to the yes intent, it went to fallback. The user said no, it went to the no intent, it went to the fallback. And it's like, how is that possible? Because I have yes and no handlers. They fully log. They're fully try, except, protected. When I see fallback, it just says, yep, you hit fallback, and there was no yes before that. So there's so that's why it'd be great to have the analytic folks on, because I feel like I'm missing something. My model may be different than their model, but yes going to fallback is just weird.
Yeah, I agree.
It'd be great if we could go into, the used to work in law firms, and I hope this is okay to say, but sort of the Chinese firewall of like, let's get in a room, no recording devices, and y'all tell us what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are working on programs like that, and I know that Amanda's on behind the scenes, but we do have some programs. One is called ADAC. It's our Alexa Developer Advisory Council. This is a very small initiative, but we do bring developers in from time to time and have those conversations about, hey, we're thinking about this feature. We haven't implemented anything yet. How would you do it? How would you think about this stuff? And I'm sure a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, I want to be involved in that or these pieces. But it's a very tight knit, small group that get together with heavy NDAs and all sorts of other crazy stuff. So as we can continue to broaden a program like that, or if we can find a way to do it a little with larger reach, I certainly would love to do that. But I just don't want to set any promises or expectations right now.
Right. I wonder if maybe this is just another reason for us to do the 5 developers at a time, try to break each other's skill.
Yeah.
Because, that maybe people are saying, yes, I want to hear about Arsenal and,
Right. Of course. I think there's lots of ways to say things that there's no way you can think of all of them when you're building your model, for sure.
All right. Well, I'll try to make that happen then.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, Brian, it has been a pleasure. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
We actually had very, very few questions today. I think a lot of people were engaged in what you had to say. So I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was so much fun.
Yeah. So we will be back again next week. We're here every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Next week I will be 2 days before I go to the Caribbean. So I hopefully 2 weeks from now, I'll come back with a little bit of a tan or something. But we will be here. We will be answering your questions. I look forward to the conversation, and hopefully we'll see you all again very soon. So, Brian Tarbox, thank you.
If you're my pleasure, and if you're at reInvent, come see me and we'll have a drink.
Yes, totally agree. All right, everybody, take care. Have a good week, and we'll see you next week.